Justice Gokhale, other dignitaries on the dais, and friends. I call myself a Nehruvian Indian. And that is an objective description. It's not a subjective description. It does not, a Nehruvian Indian does not necessarily have to admire Nehru. I'll tell you by definition of a Nehruvian Indian. A Nehruvian Indian is someone who thinks he is at home everywhere in India, but whose critics say is at home nowhere in India. And it's an objective description and applies to many people like me whose parents were in government service. My father was a scientist, originally Tamil, but grew up in Bengaluru, but he worked in Dehradun, in a laboratory in Dehradun, in a government laboratory. So I was born and raised in Uttarakhand. I studied in Delhi and then did my doctorate in Calcutta. And for the last 20 odd years I have lived in Bengaluru. So I would say socially, I have been shaped by three towns or cities: Dehradun, my hometown; Bengaluru, my adoptive hometown; and Kolkata, where I came of age as an intellectual. But in many ways, intellectually rather than socially, Pune has meant much more to me. And this would be true of at one level of every modern Indian, of every moderately progressive Indian, because of the legacy of Gokhale, Phule, Savitribai Phule, Ambedkar, and right down to Hamid Dalwai and others. It would also be, in my case, there is the fact that my profession, that of social science, is one in which Punekars have been pioneers, three in particular. The polymath economist, sociologist, and institutional builder D.R. Gadgil, the brilliant independent historian D.D. Kosambi, and the equally brilliant and independent anthropologist Iravati Karve. My work is somewhere between history, anthropology, sociology, so obviously those three Punekars have had an influence. But when I think of my own professional career and the kind of books I've written, Pune has figured in most of them. I was a student of economics and a second-rate student of economics. At the same time, I was playing cricket for my college team, and I was also a second-class cricketer. So I was a second-class cricketer and a second-class economist who was rescued, I would say, from an unhappy mediocrity by the reading of the works of a remarkable pioneering anthropologist called Verrier Elwin, who was a brilliant Oxford scholar who came to India and later on became the foremost interpreter and activist on behalf of Adivasi people. And I read him in my college library and decided that sociology and anthropology could be a vehicle where I could fulfill my intellectual ambitions, having so conspicuously failed at cricket and economics. I then was inspired by Elwin to do sociology. And Elwin started life in Pune. His Indian life started in Pune. He was an amazing man. He had first-class degrees in English and theology. He was the son of a bishop. He grew up in the church. In a sense, like Hamid Dalwai, he was a bit of a rebel within his religious tradition. And he was disenchanted with Orthodox Christianity, came to India to join a Christian ashram, whose building still stands in Shivaji Nagar. The Krista Seva Sangh is what it was called. And he spent his first 5 years in India in that Christian ashram, trying to indigenize Christianity. He then met Gandhi and then inspired Gandhi went to work among Adivasis. So that was my first professional connection to Pune through the works of Elwin. Then I started a PhD working on environmental subjects, and in many ways my main mentor in that field was Madhav Gadgil, who I'm delighted is here today, who is an authentic Punekar, having come back here after many years in Bangalore and Karnataka. And it was really Madhav's intellectual and personal, how do I put it, his personal integrity and his intellectual vision that shaped much of my early work. I'm now working on a biography of Mahatma Gandhi. The first volume came out 3 or 4 years ago. The next volume will come out maybe next year. And of course, Pune figures a great deal in Gandhi's life. He visited here often. He spent long jail terms here. He argued with Ambedkar here. The Hindutvawadis tried to kill him here. Their first attempt was in Pune in 1934. It was another Punekar succeeded 14 years later, but the first attempt was here. So Pune, of course, is very important in Gandhi's life. And in that sense, I find, and in between Elwin, environment, and Gandhi, I wrote a social history of cricket. And I'd like to talk a little bit about it, because its heroes were 2 people from Pune. They were a family of Dalit cricketers. And I want to, at least for the younger people in this audience, tell them about how I got interested in this family. I was interested in cricket. I played cricket. I wrote fans' essays on cricket. And one day I was looking at an old newspaper in the Nehru Museum in Delhi on the microfilm. It was the issue of the Bombay Chronicle dated sometime September or October 1913. In those days, 1913, 1914, the major cricketing tournament in India was called the Bombay Quadrangular. And it was played between the Hindus, the Muslims, the Parsis, and the Europeans. And there was a news report about, it was in a sense, it was the IPL of those days, without the corruption. But it evoked a kind of interest, incredible media interest. So the tournament took place in December, but from September, October, all the interest started. India was not then playing Test cricket. And the captain of the Hindu team had been chosen. And there was a news report. The captain of the Hindu team, M.D. Pai, had been chosen, and he was being felicitated by his caste association, the Gaud Saraswats of Mumbai. And the news report was as follows. M.D. Pai, it was on M.D. Pai's felicitation on being given the greatest honor, captain of the Hindu team. And in his reply to the felicitation, M.D. Pai said that while he was very grateful to his community for felicitating me, he was not the best candidate to be captain. It was rather his colleague Palwankar Balu who should have been captain. So I started thinking, do you hear Virat Kohli saying R. Ashwin should be captain? Have you ever heard, did Azharuddin ever say that Sachin Tendulkar should be captain? I said, this is isko dal mein kala hai. Why would someone appointed a captain say somebody else should be captain? And I started probing more and more, and the reason became apparent. Balu was a Dalit. And Balu was also a bowler. And there is a prejudice in favor of batsman captain, which continues till today. But mostly he was a Dalit. And the story of Palwankar Balu is an extraordinary story which begins in Pune. He was born in Dharwad, but he comes to Pune. He becomes a groundsman in the Pune club, which is a whites-only club. And the white men, he mows the lawn, and they ask him to bowl to them. Because, batsmen need practice. So the black man is not good enough to enter the club, to be a member of the club, but he can bowl. And his proficiency gets known as a bowler that across the river, in the city side, the Pune Hindus want him in their team. And they get him in their team, but they will not have tea with him. And that's how the story starts. And it's a story described at great length in my book, Corner of a Foreign Field. But a lot of the action is centered in Pune. Balu never becomes captain, even though he's far and away the best cricketer India has produced at that time. He's a great left-arm spinner, the forerunner of Bishan Singh Bedi, Vinu Mankad, Ravindra Jadeja, and so on. And he never becomes captain because of his caste. His younger brother Vittal is a batsman, which is advantage number 1. Advantage number 2 is Vittal becomes a cricketer after Gandhiji returns to South Africa, and Gandhiji starts his agitation against untouchability. And he's a fantastic batsman. There's a major movement to have him made captain. It fails, and it fails in this city, Pune. Because Pune, as I explained in my talk yesterday, is the home to all that is most progressive and all that is most reactionary in the Indian tradition. And in 1922, the reactionaries win. Vittal is removed from the team, not only made captain. The Hindus lose. Mama Varedkar writes a play, which Madhav Gadgil was kind enough to translate for me, castigating the Pune Brahmins. The next year, Vittal is made captain in Mumbai, and he scores 100 and the Hindus win beating the Europeans. Now, these are stories of our early cricketers, which combine, of course, heroic social activism, fighting for dignity and self-respect. Balu himself is an early hero of Baba Sahib Ambedkar. One of Ambedkar's first public speeches was felicitating Balu after he returned from a tour of England in 1911 and got 150 wickets. Ambedkar was then a student in Mumbai, college student. But they were also extraordinary cricketers. Raj Singh Dungarpur, who also had a home in Pune and was a famous Indian cricket administrator and knew a great deal about cricket, was a walking encyclopedia of Indian cricket, once told me, I was telling him about my research on Balu and Vittal, and he said, I never watched Vittal, but my father did. So this would be in the 1920s. And then Raj Singh said, my father, who was also a Maharaja and a patron of the game, told me Vittal was as good a batsman as Hazare. Raj Singh told me Hazare was as good a batsman as Gavaskar. And I will tell my son Gavaskar was as good as Tendulkar. Which means Vittal was as good as Tendulkar. So, I've had it's, as I said, my professional, intellectual, personal connection to Pune is a deep and ongoing one. I'm greatly honored to be here today, to be writing in Sadhana, to have my collection of essays brought out at the same time as the first Marathi edition of Hamid Dalwai's book. I'm delighted that Vijay Chitre is here today. Dilip Chitre was a close friend of mine, and without him, you would not have had Muslim politics in India, which is a book that transformed my intellectual outlook on the politics of our country. And he was an extraordinary figure. I mean, Dalwai himself was an extraordinary figure. I think as Razia's talk showed, his legacy lives on. It will be furthered. It's even more relevant now than when he lived and struggled. And I'm delighted Memnun Sabhavi is also here. But I want to end with a personal, another personal note of appreciation and thankfulness at my book being published by Sadhana. And also, if you'll allow me to end with another cricketing metaphor. As Vinod Sirsat said, it was Govind Talwalkar who first introduced me to Sadhana. And it's appropriate for me that Kumar Ketkar is one of the chief guests and will be speaking shortly after me. Because Govind Talwalkar is to Kumar Ketkar as Sunil Gavaskar is to Sachin Tendulkar. Two scholar journalists. You don't have scholar editors in any language. Major editors of English newspapers don't read books. And they're proud to say so. And I was appalled. 20 years ago, Dom Moraes, who was a very fine writer, wrote a book. And I was in Delhi at the time of the release. And I walked into the release and there was the editor of a major English language paper, a paper with whose Marathi edition Kumar later edited. So that's the hint I'll give you, who this person was. And he said, in his introduction, he said, I have speed read the book. Look at the arrogance of the man. He's releasing a book by Dom Moraes, who's the finest writer of English prose in India. So I think people like Kumar and Govind Talwalkar are rare in any language, in any era. But like Govind Talwalkar, Kumar is a scholar editor. But again, Gavaskar versus Tendulkar. And I should explain that. Kumar hits a lot more sixes than Govind Talwalkar ever did. But he flashes outside the off stump also a little more than Gavaskar did. Thank you.